think, yeah, I can't believe you believe in that man. We disagree, but I still give a damn. Your guru assures if you follow his regimen, you will become a most excellent specimen. The power to live on and on for all days is right at your fingertips if someone pays.
I'm excited. I'm a celebrity.
I'll keep you alive for 3 easy installments of $10.95. The device he uses sucks out the bad juices and leaves no bad bruises.
Well, anti-intellectualism, that's something in America, although it's becoming more of a problem in Western Europe too, as I was made forcibly aware by my Italian friends. Anti-intellectualism is basically a disrespect for learning. It often will manifest itself as contempt for the experts. What do the scientists know? Blah, blah, blah. Particularly contempt for the humanities, and just contempt the idea that people who are intellectuals, who value learning for its own sake, are impractical, that their heads are in the clouds, that there's some kind of an opposition between practical action and learning. And it's very strong. It's an old strain in America. The fundamental book written on this, the best work of scholarship, is Richard Hofstadter's Anti-intellectualism in American Life, which was published in 1961. It has always been related to religious fundamentalism in that anti-intellectualism is strongest among people who are less educated. And nobody likes this when you talk about it, religious people. But the connection, not between religion and lack of education, but between fundamentalist religion and lack of education, is very strong. It's no accident that the states in which there are the smallest proportion of both high school and college graduates, the Deep South, are also the states in which fundamentalism is stronger. It is absolutely true that the more education people have, the less likely they are to believe in things like the earth was created in 6 days and dinosaurs and man roamed the earth together. It is absolutely true that education of a certain kind is the enemy of a certain kind of religion. So that the strength of fundamentalist religion has something to do with American anti-intellectualism, but in a way, it's kind of ironic, but because we were also a country that in the 19th century spread public education, that is free public education, to a degree that was unknown in Europe and England at the time. So there's a contradiction there. I think now with the digital world, Europe is beginning to catch up. If I were rewriting The Age of American Unreason, which was published in 2008, I would probably add a chapter, though tests show that the educational systems of Europe and Asia are still functioning a lot better than ours. But that not so much straight anti-intellectualism, but flat-out ignorance and their first cousins is growing in Europe. I'll give you a good example of this. I just got back from a vacation in Italy, where I interviewed a Monsignor, who is the head of the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, the Museum of the Duomo in Florence. And they have now many more tourists from India and China and all of Asia than used to be with the rise of wealth in those countries in Florence. And one of his concerns is how in exhibits can you help people understand the story who weren't raised in these traditions. But as he said then, a lot of the Americans and Europeans who are coming look at these things which until about 50 years ago, everybody would have understood as part of the common culture. Let's say the story of Joseph and his brothers or the sacrifice of Abraham was something which certainly until the middle of the 20th century Yeah, because reading the Bible, it was just part of the common education in America as well as Europe. That is no longer true. So that he said the problem of explaining what this stuff was based on is not just of explaining to people from non-Western cultures, but of explaining to people from Western cultures. So if I were rewriting The Age of American Unreason only 6 years later, I would have to add a chapter that there's a kind of unholy convergence, if you'll excuse the expression, that Americans aren't becoming less ignorant on these points, but Europeans are becoming more ignorant.
Interesting.
Which I attribute in part to the victory of the digital world.
What would your thoughts be if I've heard people argue that we should be teaching more about religion in public schools, not necessarily teaching Christianity as it's true, but this is what Christianity, this is what Muslim.
What I would say is that given the success of our schools at teaching kids to read and do their sums and multiply and divide, I would really hate to think of what elementary school teachers would do with the history of Judaism or the history of Catholicism or the history of Buddhism. This is a completely unrealistic idea on more reasons than one. One, we've got educational problems that are bigger than that. I figure if you teach kids to read, that's a good step toward having them able to find out something about anything. Let's see the schools doing that first. But secondly, there is nothing more politically impossible than the idea. I can't imagine what a stupid curriculum about religion that somebody wouldn't object to.
Right.
I don't want, as an atheist, my kid being taught about Catholicism or Judaism in school, although I do in fact want them to know about those traditions, and not only from my point of view, but I certainly don't want them being taught by somebody who has a BA in education in 4th grade about it. I think in fact this is the problem which the Monsignor, who's the head of the museum in Florence, raised, that this is a real problem. It is a problem for atheist parents too, and it is a problem for religious people who don't go to church. How do you teach children about a culture that they don't participate in? Fact is, I went to Catholic school. I'm not the least bit sorry I went to Catholic school. I think a lot of the questions which arose in my head were the result of being educated in Catholic school. I am glad about the things I learned there, both good and bad. I don't know frankly, I don't know how you teach children about religion when they are not raised in religion. I don't have children, so I haven't had to face it.
Sure.
But I know that the public schools aren't the place to do it, that I don't want to be paying my tax money to teach. And I think also there's another aspect about this which has nothing to do with atheism or religion. It's another case of Americans, and this is American in particular, throwing up their hands and expecting the schools to do something that they're not willing to do themselves. When I was growing up, no religious parents expected public schools to teach kids about religion. If you wanted your kid to have a religious education, you sent them to Jewish school or Catholic school. This was not the function of the schools.
Right.
But now Americans expect the schools to do a lot of jobs that parents used to assume was their job. And this is certainly not a job the schools can do effectively.
What are your thoughts about homeschooling? Do you have any overarching thoughts about it?
My thoughts about, first of all, I think common schooling is best for education in general, and it's best for a society. Secondly, I think people who want to homeschool their children, some of whom are extremely conservative and some of whom are extremely liberal, are out of their minds and they ought to get a life. Really, if there is one thing you can imagine, is that a parent should not spend 24 hours a day with their child. And I think that's true from the standpoint of both the parent and the child. I think people who believe in homeschooling are crazy, and I don't mind saying it, and I know people of very different political values who believe in it. I think they really ought to get over themselves. There are still a lot of good public schools in this country, but I also think there is something else on both the conservative and the left-wing side, and there are a lot more right-wing homeschoolers. But it's also just of the feeling the government can't do anything right. Also, a kind of obsessive helicopter parenting, that you can control everything your child learns. But I do not know how it can be good for parents and children to spend that kind of amount of time together. And I think that both mothers and fathers ought to have a career apart from controlling everything their children do 24 hours a day. God, when I think of what it would have been like, I would 1,000 times rather have been schooled by the meanest nuns than have been with my mom. No disrespect to my deceased mother all day. And I'm sure she would have felt the same way because my mother, whatever her deficiency were, was a sane person. This is not sane. What is progress? Progress is being able to say goodbye to your children for a few hours a day. Take them and chauffeur them in the car and leave them in the care of somebody else.
What is it about somebody who is uneducated that makes them sort of fear education in the anti-intellectual scope?
Well, I think it's they don't understand what it can do, and if they are ultra-religious right, they feel correctly that education is the enemy of their deepest values. They are not wrong about that. I'm not saying that they are. It's not that there are educated fundamentalists, but there is a strong correlation between higher education and rejection of religious fundamentalism. People know that, and they have a reason to fear education if their highest priority is that their kids are to believe these things.
So tell me how you got into the anti-intellectual sort of stuff. So I understand that you sort of made the transition into skepticism. How did you get in? Was there something that sparked your interest in anti-intellectualism? Anything particular?
Not really. I just basically the world of I've always been interested in it. It's always been part of the American character. It's an interesting part of the American character. And as I began writing more American intellectual history, it's a natural because it is also related to religious fundamentalism but really I think the last 20 years and the rise of the digital world, and by the way, I am not opposed to computers and the digital world. However, I think that there is a real downside to the, you hear all the time people saying computers are making us smarter, Now I'll have to leave this out of my speech tonight. No, they're not. Computers are offering us a bigger menu of information. To say that computers are making us smarter is like saying forks in the Renaissance were making people better eaters. No, they made people eat more neatly. You could eat with a fork without slobbering down on whatever disgusting clothing you were wearing. You could eat neater and you could eat faster. And computers offer us access to more information faster. They don't offer us knowledge because if you don't have the general knowledge to assess what you're looking at on the web, then all it's offering you is more information that you don't know how to sort out, which is one of the reasons people tend to go only to websites that support what they already believe.
Sure, absolutely. So do you have any predictions for, say, 10 years from now, what the political and educational landscape is going to look like? Do you think we're going on a path towards better education or worse?
I don't know. I don't think that there have been any improvements. It's hard to say. I think in general in America and Western Europe probably worse. Certainly the economic crisis that's been going on in the Western world since 2008 has withdrawn resources from public education. While money isn't the only answer to our educational problems, the withdrawal of money from the public sector certainly doesn't bode well. I mean, for example, look right now at the sequestration. Funds being withdrawn from Head Start programs all over the country, which we know work in terms of helping prepare kids for school who are the least prepared. Look, the rich are always going to do well by their own kids, but the kind of education that middle class people get, the withdrawal of public resources from public education is a very bad thing, and I am completely opposed to the rise of charter schools, which, by the way, I think that President Obama and a lot of leftists have taken exactly the wrong tack in joining the right in supporting these. I don't think that in every middle class society the key to it has been an expanded and better system of public education. Throwing up our hands and saying, well, we can't do this. We're going to have to, in a way, privatize public schools. Mm-hmm. I think it's giving up the ghost, because charter schools are always going to be, even if they're not just for the rich, they're always going to be for those parents who have the motivation to get their kids into them. Mm-hmm. And that isn't the problem, the children of motivated parents. Mm-hmm. What public education did in this country for immigrants was it took the children of average parents and gave them something that parents couldn't give them themselves. And this idea that parents can be able to give kids everything, yes, it is the responsibility of parents to educate their kids in certain things, but it is not the responsibility of parents to be able to navigate a system of private schools and come up with enough money for them and get around the bureaucratic restrictions that somehow let kids from more affluent neighborhoods get into these schools and kids not. That is exactly what poorly educated parents can't do. And there are a lot of poorly educated parents.
Absolutely. So do you think the rise of charter schools is diminishing like upward mobility of?
I think it won't help.
Okay.
But I absolutely agree with Diane Ravitch, who is a conservative, who served in the Department of Education under both Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, and was in favor of charter schools. And she's one of the most outspoken voices against them now, because testing shows that they're no better for all of the money that's put into them. Also, and there's another thing, they're being used in a lot of places to bring religion in by the back door. You know, they call themselves public charter schools, but they're started by fundamentalists, or they're started by ultra-Orthodox Jews in New York City. And the idea that my tax money is going to those schools just burns me up.
Let's see, what are you looking forward to in TAM?
Oh, what am I looking forward to in TAM? I'm just looking forward to speaking to a bunch of illusionists who are sort of like my natural audience. But I've already gotten what I want out of TAM: the respect of a whole bunch of teenage boys on the tram at Las Vegas Airport who are here for another totally unrelated high school convention. But when, as I said, I was speaking against it, oh, the amazing Randy, we wish we could come in here. They helped me with my luggage. My status went up so much in the Las Vegas Airport because I ran into these high school kids. So TAM has got to be doing something right. I mean, I can't tell you, I felt like such a status celebrity when I got out, just because I was speaking here.
That's funny.